Please subscribe to this channel for more amazing sci-fi and HFY stories. Now, let's begin. The Galactic Council chamber echoed with tension as representatives from 47 worlds whispered about something that had shaken even hardened military commanders. At the center of their hushed conversations was a single word that made warriors shiver: death. Ambassador Chen raised his crystalline form, light fracturing through his translucent body. Fellow delegates, our scouts have discovered a planet so hostile, so utterly savage, that it defies understanding of how life could exist. Holographic projections filled the chamber. This world's predators never sleep. They hunt from ground, air, and beneath the soil. The storms can tear through reinforced battle armor like paper. The chamber erupted in gasps as images showed creatures with venomous fangs, insects the size of vehicles, and weather patterns that could swallow fleets. The Warrior of Rex delegation recoiled at footage of oceanic beasts with tentacles capable of crushing starships. Temperature variations swing from flesh-melting heat to bone-shattering cold within a single rotation. This world teems with the most aggressive, adaptable killing machines we've ever documented. But in the shadows, Ambassador Chen of the Terran Federation sat unmoved by the panic. His weathered hands folded calmly, while his lips curved into the faintest smile. While delegates trembled at descriptions of this mythical hell world, his dark eyes held recognition. The Zephyrian High Commander spoke in a voice like wind through metal. Such a place could never give rise to sentient life. This Deathworld must be a weapon created by some ancient civilization. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Chen rose with fluid grace, causing a gradual hush. Every eye turned toward this unremarkable human as he descended toward the central floor. His boots echoed in the sudden silence. When he reached the speaking circle, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives before settling on the holographic displays. Then, with a smile that held ancient secrets, he spoke. "That's Earth." The silence had physical weight. Delegates stared as if he had declared himself mythological. Chen clasped his hands behind his back and began walking around the displays. "You want proof? Let me paint you a complete picture of this Deathworld you fear. In our forests, we have creatures no larger than my thumb, that carry enough venom to kill beings your size. We call them spiders, and human children learn to identify them before they can walk. Our oceans are filled with predators using biological sonar, creatures with teeth that bite through steel, and organisms so intelligent they solve puzzles that stump our computers. We have great whites, orcas, and giant squids that could tear apart your smaller vessels." He gestured to horrified expressions. "And we swim in those same oceans for recreation." Chen continued his catalogue of terrestrial terrors. "Our planet regularly attempts to kill us with forces that dwarf your weapons. Volcanoes that erase cities in minutes, earthquakes that swallow nations, storms carrying the energy of 1,000 nuclear warheads. We have deserts where temperature cooks flesh from bone and frozen wastes where cold kills in minutes." His smile widened as delegates shuddered. "And in these places, we've built cities and raised children." The chamber fell silent. Chen paused before the central display, touching the image of a hurricane that could swallow a space station. "But here's what truly sets Earth apart. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We turned deadly forces into tools of advancement. We learned to predict storms and sail by them, read earthquakes and build cities that dance with ground fury, harness volcanic fire and rushing water to power civilization. Our history is written in blood of species that faced less hostile environments and failed. We fought wars with stones when your ancestors struggled with fire. We built empires, watched them fall to plague and famine, then built new ones from ashes. Every human child is born on a world where everything tries to kill them from first breath. The air can poison, water carries invisible killers, food harbors parasites, and still, we endure." A tremor ran through the assembled delegates as they began to process the implications of what they were hearing. This wasn't just another species describing their homeworld. This was a creature forged by forces that their own civilizations would consider apocalyptic, explaining why humans showed no fear in the face of galactic threats that terrified seasoned warriors. The Vrex general, a being who had conquered 3 star systems and was known for his brutality, found his voice barely above a whisper. "If what you say is true, then your people are not merely survivors, you are the apex predators of a world designed to create the ultimate killers." Ambassador Chen's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes that made even the most hardened military commanders in the chamber take an unconscious step backward. "Apex predators? No, General. We are something far more dangerous than that." He paused. letting the weight of anticipation build before delivering his next words with surgical precision. We are a species that learned to survive by becoming more adaptable, more ruthless, and more innovative than anything our world could throw at us. We didn't dominate our environment through strength. Alone, we dominated it through intelligence, cooperation, and the absolute refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds became. The crystalline ambassador's form flickered with patterns of disbelief as he processed the data streaming from their sensors trained on the human. You cannot be serious. No sentient species could evolve under such conditions and still maintain the capacity for higher thought. The constant stress alone should have prevented the development of complex neural structures. But even as he spoke, his own bioscanners were confirming what they all feared to acknowledge this human showed. None of the physiological markers of stress or fear that should have been flooding his system while surrounded by beings who could kill him with casual thought. Higher thought. Chen laughed, and the sound carried no warmth whatsoever. Ambassador Chen, we developed higher thought as a survival mechanism. When everything in your environment is actively trying to kill you, when the weather itself can be a mortal enemy, when the very ground beneath your feet might suddenly open up and swallow you whole, you learn to think 3 steps ahead of disaster, or you don't survive to pass on your genes. We didn't develop intelligence in spite of our hostile environment. We developed it because our hostile environment demanded it. The human walked closer to the assembled delegates, noting how they unconsciously moved away from him despite their vast technological and physical advantages. Every human carries the genetic memory of thousands of generations who survived ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed 9 out of 10 people, and natural disasters that would have ended most civilizations before they began. We are not the product of a peaceful evolution toward enlightenment. We are the result of a billion-year arms race between survival and extinction. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried perfectly through the chamber. And we won that race so decisively that we eventually ran out of things on our own planet capable of challenging us. The massive Rex general, whose species had built an empire through conquest, and whose personal combat record included single-handedly destroying enemy battalions, took another step backward. Then what? He asked in a voice that trembled with implications he was only beginning to understand. Does that make you among the stars? The question hung in the air like a blade, because every being in that chamber was beginning to realize they might have been looking at the situation completely wrong. They had assumed that humans were fortunate survivors of a hostile world, refugees seeking sanctuary among the more civilized species of the galaxy. Ambassador Chen turned toward the general, his smile becoming something that would have been perfectly at home on the face of the great white sharks he had mentioned earlier. It makes us ready for anything you can imagine, and most things you cannot. He gestured toward the holographic displays, still showing Earth's hostile environment. You see a Deathworld. We see home. You see insurmountable challenges. We see opportunities for growth. You see forces of nature that inspired terror. We see Tuesday, the casual dismissal of planet-killing forces as mundane routines sent a chill through beings who commanded the power to glass worlds from orbit. The chamber fell into a silence so profound that some delegates began to wonder if their translation equipment had failed. But Ambassador Chen wasn't finished. When we first received your invitation to join this Galactic Council, do you know what our scientists' primary concern was? They worried that the other species might be too fragile for us to interact with safely. They worried that our very presence might be psychologically traumatic to beings who evolved on worlds where the greatest threat might be a seasonal weather change or a predator that actually needed to sleep. He paused, letting that sink in. They were right to worry. But perhaps, Chen continued, you'd like a demonstration of what humans consider normal childhood education. He activated his personal datapad, and new holographic displays filled the chamber. These showed human children barely old enough to walk being taught to identify deadly plants, venomous creatures, and dangerous weather patterns. The aliens watched in growing horror as the images showed human youngsters learning to swim in waters filled with predators, climb mountains that could kill experienced mountaineers from other worlds, and treat injuries that would require full medical teams on most civilized planets. The Zephyrian High Commander's scales had shifted to colors that indicated deep psychological distress. This is not education, this is combat training for soldiers. But even as she spoke, she could see that these were clearly civilian children engaging in what humans considered routine preparation for adult life. The implications were staggering. If this was how humans prepared their young for normal existence, what would their actual military training look like? Ambassador Chen nodded approvingly at her observation. Exactly. Every human child receives what you would consider advanced survival training, because on Earth, the alternative is death. We learn to read weather patterns that could kill us, identify creatures that could poison us, navigate terrain that could trap us, and treat medical emergencies that could claim us before help arrives. He gestured to the images of human children casually handling situations that would require specialized military units from most other species. This is not exceptional, this is mandatory. Any human who cannot perform these basic survival skills is unlikely to reach reproductive age. The revelation that what they were witnessing represented the minimum acceptable competency level for human civilians, rather than elite military training, was causing visible distress among several delegates. The crystalline ambassador's light patterns were fluctuating wildly as he processed the implications. If your children must be trained to this level merely to survive normal existence, then your military forces, ... double quotes. He couldn't complete the thought, but he didn't need to. Every being in the chamber was beginning to understand why human military advisors were so sought after, and why human mercenaries commanded prices that seemed absurdly high until you considered their effectiveness. Our military, Chen's smile, became positively predatory. Our military consists of individuals who survived childhood on the world you've been calling a world, then volunteered to face even greater challenges. They are people who looked at an environment that actively tried to kill them every day of their lives and said, "This isn't enough. I want to protect others from experiencing something truly dangerous." He paused to let the assembled delegates contemplate what humans might consider truly dangerous if Earth was merely their baseline normal, the massive hegemony warform that served as their military representative. A being bred specifically for combat and enhanced with enough cybernetic implants to single-handedly assault a space station, was showing stress indicators that its designers had never imagined would be needed. "Are you suggesting," it asked in a voice like grinding metal, "that your species views armed conflict as less dangerous than your normal environment?" The question revealed the terrifying possibility that humans might consider warfare to be a relatively safe and controlled activity compared to ordinary daily existence on their homeworld. Armed conflict. Chen appeared to consider the question seriously. War, at least, has rules. War has objectives, strategies, logical outcomes. War involves opponents who think, who can be predicted, who have limitations and goals you can understand. His expression grew distant, as if remembering something from long ago. War is fighting against other intelligent beings, who, fundamentally, want to survive just as much as you do. Earth doesn't want anything, except to test every possible way that physics and chemistry and biology can kill you, all simultaneously, all the time, forever. He focused back on the stunned assembly. War is actually quite restful by comparison. The silence that followed this statement was broken only by the sound of several delegates' breathing apparatus working overtime to process their shock. They were beginning to understand that they had been thinking about this situation entirely wrong from the beginning. These weren't refugees from a hostile world seeking protection among more advanced civilizations. These were apex survivors from a proving ground that would have destroyed their entire species in a matter of days. Ambassador Chen began walking toward the chamber exit, his casual stride making it clear that he considered this conversation concluded. But he paused at the massive doorway and turned back one final time, his expression thoughtful rather than threatening. "There's one more thing you should understand about humans," he said, his voice carrying easily across the vast space. "Everything I've described, the hostile environment, the constant danger, the requirement that our children, master skills your military specialists, struggle with, none of that is what made us who we are." The assembled delegates leaned forward despite themselves, desperate to understand what could possibly be more significant than the revelations they had already received. Chen's smile returned, but this time it carried warmth alongside its dangerous edge. "What made us who we are is that despite living on a world that tried to kill us every single day, we learned to love it. We learned to find beauty in its storms, wonder in its deadly creatures, joy in overcoming its challenges. We learned to call it home and mean it." His eyes swept across the chamber one final time. Earth didn't just create survivors, it created survivors who care enough about others to leave the world that forged them and venture out among the stars to protect those who never had to be as strong as we became. The human ambassador was almost through the doorway when the Vrex general found his voice again. "If Earth is the Deathworld of galactic legend, then what does that make humans?" The question hung in the air, like a physical presence, carrying the weight of every delegate's fears about what they had unknowingly invited into their careful balance of galactic power. Ambassador Chen paused without turning around, his silhouette framed in the doorway like a figure from their darkest myths. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with absolute finality. Not monsters, General, just survivors who learned that the universe is far more beautiful and far more fragile than Earth ever taught us it could be. He stepped through the doorway, leaving behind a chamber full of beings who were beginning to realize that everything they thought they knew about human nature had been turned upside down in the space of a single conversation. As his footsteps faded down the crystalline corridor, the assembled delegates sat in stunned silence, each processing the same terrible realization. They had spent decades fearing the discovery of the legendary Deathworld, imagining it as some distant threat that might someday challenge their comfortable galactic civilization. They had never imagined that the survivors of that world were already walking among them, had been protecting them, had been holding back their true nature out of consideration for species too fragile to handle the full truth of what humans really were. To the galaxy, Earth was the unimaginable Deathworld that existed beyond the edge of possibility. To humans, it was just home. And now, for the first time in galactic history, the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations understood exactly what that meant. Please subscribe for more epic sci-fi stories.